All right, hello and welcome to this build guide for the farming Sentinel. That's also a shield throw Sentinel. This is a return to an old build with some pretty significant modifications, some updates. As the patches have gone on, a lot of things have changed, and moving this into more of a farm role. If you go back into some of my older channel builds, you will find a shield throw build that is similar to this, although definitely not the same. In fact, I believe that build relies on shield throw damage specifically. This one's going to rely on spell damage, which is something that I believe Holy Coffee found several months ago and is still probably the best way to make a shield throw build. So that's what we're going to be working with today. This is the second farming build I've put out in probably 2 weeks. That's going to be the thing for the next few weeks. I want to put 4 farming builds out, 1 for each class. These aren't just like a farming build you can use. These are the farming builds I am using. So I'm working on a Primalist right now. That's really good. I'm working on an Acolyte as well. And we already released the Mage one, like I said, I think last week. So this is the second in that series. So I really enjoy this build, as I have for months. Now I've tweaked it. And it's got a lot of advantages to it. So let's go over the pros and cons. First off, it does really good damage. Of course, it's a farm build. It needs to. But it does really good both single target and multi-target, although its multi-target is definitely much better than single. It's not the greatest single target killer. The mage build I put out last week is definitely better at single target, but this one is not going to suffer at all as far as damage goes. It's going to be up there. It's pretty high. Secondly, it's got good mobility, great mobility if you put celerity on your boots. I currently don't, but I still have usually about 50% move speed. That's pretty solid. I'm not using a movement ability, but I certainly could. I could take Smite off my bar and put Lunge, or well, I can't put Shield Rush on there because I'm not using a shield, but I could put Lunge on there to get another movement ability. I just don't need it. So we have Haste up for 2 seconds every time we use Shield Throw. It's another 30% move speed on top of whatever move speed we already have. So we get around really quickly. The third thing this has that it's got as an advantage over the Mage build is it's very tanky, and going to be more tanky the more you put into it, the more you invest. The Sentinel can get to incredible levels of tankiness, even for a shield throw paladin build. But yeah, this one still has very little problem. In fact, its monolith run right now is up to 66 and not really being challenged that much. Can probably go quite a bit further. I wouldn't be surprised if it could go 100 plus as it is, and it's not a finished product. But it's far enough along to where you can see we can get very far in the monolith with this build. The tankiness is a huge benefit over some of the other farm builds. So that's the positives. What about the negatives? Well, there's only really one negative, so to speak, and that's the relatively high cost to optimize this build. You don't need to optimize it. It works really well without good gear. So this is like only kind of a downside, because if you want to get the absolute most out of it, there are some things that you need to collect that are really important. The only things that you need up front, though, are at least a couple of decent Smite idols. That could definitely be considered a downside because those are required, but there is no required uniques in this build. And most of the more important things are crafting. And there is one unique that you could definitely want deep end game, but you won't need it for a long time. So that's really all there is as far as that goes. As far as playability of this build, there's really only one annoyance. This is mostly a plug and play. The only thing you have to worry about is keeping Sigils of Hope up, but the crafting requirements are pretty substantial to get the most out of this. I'm still probably going to put this, I would say this is between like a beginner friendly and an experienced, just because to get the most out of it, you need to really put some time in. But a beginner can pick this up, and all they need to do is get the Smite idols. And so that takes some work. And so I would say it's probably not pure, like it's not like day one you started playing, you can make this build and it's going to work like this, because you need those Smite procs to get your attack speed, plus Smite does damage. But that's about it, really. That's the only thing that's a downside. So as far as things to worry about patch-wise, I think eventually the spell portion of Shield Throw is going to get nerfed, because it's not really how it feels like the skill was designed. It wasn't designed to be played with a staff. Like, I have to believe that you don't make a shield throw skill in a game and assume people are going to run with his staff. So I think that's going to change at some point. I don't think the spell-based playstyle of shield throw is going to last forever. But I say that while it's been up for like 4 months now. Like, it's survived at least 3 patches, I think, untouched. So who knows when it'll get nerfed? I think it will eventually, but it may not be for a while. So nothing definite coming down the pipe here anytime soon. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and just get into the skills. Let's start with the main skill of the build, which is shield throw. So this works a little bit differently than maybe some of the shield throw builds you may have seen using eruption. This is still going to use eruption. We're going to take 1 in ricochet to get down to eruption. This is what gives us a spell, lava burst, that deals fire damage. And then we're going to take all 5 points of magma rage, which gives it a more damage multiplier of 150%. This is how it does a lot of damage. And we're going to go ahead and take Molten Shield. Honestly, you can probably avoid this if you want to, but since we're already kind of stacking fire damage, you might as well get some fire damage out of your base hits. You don't need this to run Lava Burst, though. Lava Burst is a fire attack by itself. So if you want to put that point somewhere else, you could, but I think it's probably best to put it here. Oh, by the way, I should probably point out, if you're going to make this build work, you always have to take these. Now, down here, this is a requirement of most shield throw builds, because it's going to get you down to where there's no cooldown on shield throw. Otherwise, you would have a cooldown, and it's really annoying, and you wouldn't be able to do enough damage because you have to stack attack speed to make this work. So definitely grab this stuff down here. Then you can go up here and take 4 in Fleet of Foot. This is going to give us our haste for 2 seconds. This is definitely the farm portion of the build. If I was running arenas, I wouldn't take this. But to get around arenas faster, or not arenas, excuse me, to get around monoliths faster, and because we do plenty of damage anyway, we'll go ahead and take it. And then we'll finish off with 2 into Armor Aegis, which is going to give you a lot of armor, especially with your attack speed. Like, this gives you a large amount of armor. This character is going to run around with a ton of armor. And this is just part of the reason why, but it's definitely a substantial reason why. Okay, next up, we're going to look at Holy Aura. We're going to go ahead and take Ignite Chance for 2, but this is mostly get to the increased global fire damage 50%. We're going to take 3 in attack speed. We're going to take 2 in fizz damage, 4 in throwing attack damage, and throwing attack stun chance, and 4 in throwing attack speed. As I look at this, I've actually just now noticed something we could probably change out. You could take 2 out of this and put 1 into attack speed, and maybe, I don't know, 1 somewhere else, maybe Elemental Pen, increased crit chance, because we're not relying on throwing attack damage. But it does stun quite a bit, so you might want to keep this. Up to you, but you could definitely at least switch one of these out for attack speed if you wanted to. Up to you. But this is pretty straightforward. That's just, we're increasing our fire damage, we're increasing our attack speed. That's the majority of what we're trying to do here. Okay, next up, Ring of Shields. This serves a pretty important purpose, maybe not what you expect. So we're going to go down here and take 2 in the health and armor and elemental protection, which is really just to get us to the duration. The 6-second duration allows us to keep up Ring of Shields permanently, because as long as you're auto casting it, it will come back up before the previous one drops off. We're going to take 1 in here just in mana cost. This is honestly just a dump. We had 19 points, got to put it somewhere. Might as well get the mana cost down. 2 in additional shields, 4 in heal amount per shield, and then the real star, this armor on heal and elemental protection on heal, 50%. This is a little buggy. It doesn't always work properly, but when it does, it provides a ton of elemental protection and armor. So we'll keep it. And then 3 in increased shield healing. The heal is pretty substantial. It's a little slow. You can't only rely on it. In fact, we're going to be talking about Sigils of Hope here. Sigils gives us a lot of health regen. The combination of the health regen and the heal are generally enough to keep you up. Maybe a potion every now and then, but those 2 alone should be enough. Okay, next up, this is another really, actually all of these are really important, but this one is kind of like another build defining skill. So we're going to take 1, this is Smite by the way, we're taking 1 in Holy Wave, we're taking 3 in Righteous Fury, and all of that's just to get to Righteous Flurry, which gives us 50% attack speed whenever we hit with Smite, and we're going to auto proc Smite with those idols we were showing. So this will be going off constantly, increasing your attack speed, which also increases your proc chance, and just kind of snowballs downhill. All right, from there, Sacrifice. This is a lot of hit damage. I was testing this with 3 and 5. 5 can get, you can lose a lot of health with 5, so I've dropped it down to 3. 2 in Atonement for that 4% base crit. 3 in Sacrifice health cost to drop that health cost that it hits us with every time we get Smite to proc, and then 3 in the crit multiplier. All right, the last skill is Sigils of Hope. This is a pretty annoying skill to use right now, and so we're really trying to maximize its non-annoyingness within the skill tree. It's going to provide us with a lot of extra damage, but also a lot of extra health regen, and we're gonna work towards getting that in a state where you can relatively easily keep it up all the time. So we're gonna take 4 empowering sigils. Then we're going to take 1 in Last Wish. Chance to summon sigil on kill. I actually think this is probably higher than 6%. I think it's 6% per sigil, even though it doesn't say that. But it goes off quite a bit. So 6% does seem a little low to me. Then we're going to take 3 in Decree of Flame. We're going to take 2 in Word of Alacrity. And then we're going to take 1 in Exigency so that we can get instant cast this. It's going to be really important. We don't want to have to stop and cast our sigils while we're mid-attacking, and that'll allow us to do that. Then we're going to take Iron Sigils. Armor Protective Sigil is just going to get us to Enduring Hope, maximum duration, an additional sigil, and double our health regen from sigils. And that covers all of the skills. If you have this stuff up, you are good to go. Let's move on to the passive tree. So we'll start with Juggernaut, get that Strength, Fire Protection, Void Prot. The Fire Prot's going to be really important for this build, as you'll see later. Then we're going to take Armor Clad. More armor is always good in this build. It's gonna super tank anything physical. So we'll just maximize it. Like 2 points in Iron Mastery, which is a nice little node. It's not like amazing, but it's nice. And then we're gonna take Time and Faith for the health and mana gain on Rive, Vengeance, or Smite, and we'll be using this for Smite. Now note, late game, I found that I rarely ever use Smite directly to get the mana gain and health gain, and note that too, that you need to use it directly. Your procs won't count for this, but for a long time in the game, the mana could be a bit of an issue, and so having this really helps to offset that. You can just direct cast Smite and get a bunch of mana. So it's a nice node. I might not keep it forever in this build, but definitely while you're leveling it, it's gonna come in handy. All right, Forge Guard. We're gonna take 5 points in Battle Harden, which is huge, and then 10 points in Peltas for that throwing attack speed. The damage, we don't really care. Again, the throwing attack part of this is really just applying the spell stuff. We don't care about our throwing attack damage, but that throwing attack speed is really big. And that also is going to open us up Ring of Shields. Then we'll go in and we'll put the rest of our stuff into Paladin. I've got 8 points in Defiance for the attunement and elemental protection. That's also huge. Elemental, fire especially, but all the elementals and the armor very late game are going to be absolutely crucial. You'll see why in a little bit. Valor, Vitality, increased healing effectiveness is nice little, just get us to the next node. 5 points in Flash of Brilliance, get that health and blind chance, sure. Then we're going to go up to Holy Symbol, more elemental protection. The necrotic and healing effectiveness are nice, but the elemental is what we really want here. We've now opened up sigils and we have our entire toolkit. Inner Flame, attunement, and Fire Prot. Again, those are just really, really good. Fire protection is especially good, but elemental protection as well. 8 points in Faith Armor for the increased armor and crit avoidance. It's nice to have 4 tenths, which ends up being what 2/5. Yeah, 2/5 of your crit avoidance coming from your passive tree, and you get the armor as well, which is huge. Then we're going to take all 10 points in Holy Precision for that 300% increased spell critical strike chances. Also throwing crit chance, but again, that's not that big. The spell is huge though. So that's going to be one of the biggest nodes that we can take as far as our damage goes. From there, we're going to take 8 in Reverence of Duality, health, damage, healing effectiveness, and mana. And we've got 12 of 12 in Light of Rhea. I'd actually do Light of Rhea before Reverence of Duality, by the way. Increased fire damage and move speed is another good damaging, and that move speed is very good for farming. So that puts you at level 90. You'd only have 10 more points to go. You can finish up Reverence of Duality for sure. Another really good one is the 5 extra in Battle Harden. It's probably where I'll go next. Between those, I think that gives you 9 right there, and I'm sure you can find one place for a point. You could put it in Valor, you could probably put it in Flash of Brilliance, something like that. But that covers the entirety of the passive tree all the way to 100, which is not super unusual. You can see I've been playing this a lot. I've gotten to level 90 with it. This is actually my first level 90 character. That's pretty crazy. All right, let's move on to gearing. So gear has changed quite a bit over the last few patches, and especially so this last patch. some items have been added that are much more like of a reach or aspirational style. They're very difficult to get. They have very low drop rates, and you can't even start to farm them until higher levels. Yet they're often very powerful and best in slot for many builds. And for that reason, I'm going to slightly modify how I do the gear section here, because if those sorts of items or fixes are in the build and I don't offer a solution for characters who haven't gotten to that point where they can farm those items, that wouldn't be very fair. So I'm going to do two sections, one for sort of the starter case for your build, where you're just trying to gear it up to a point to where it's pretty good, and then more of a best case where you have all of the best possible affixes in your gear. So let's start with the starter version. For defense, we're going to talk about just two things that we really want to get, which is the glancing blow to 100%, usually with your set items, and armor and prots. And you want to make sure your armor and prots are pretty well spread out early on, because you're going to have to deal with all the different types of damage. That should cover you for quite a while. You can try to throw crit avoidance in here, but just be aware that later in the game, when some of the higher tier bases drop, you'll probably have to rework things. So you could also skip that for now if you'd like to. As far as offense goes, we want throwing attack and mana cost on the rings, but we only need tier 1 because what we really want here is just the actual mana cost to get it down to 0, so it's just not costing us anything at all. Then we want some spell damage, particularly with a staff that you'll be wearing with adaptive spell damage. The higher adaptive spell damage, the better. And fire damage is about equivalent to spell damage this build. And then throwing attack speed is really good, especially on rings and on bracers. That really covers what you need as far as your starter build. From there, you can start working towards a more best case scenario. So that's going to look more like this. For defense, you still got the glancing blow. That'd be your number one thing. Make sure you have that. Then work towards crit avoidance. And you can get most of this from the chest and the helm base. I have a 35 here and a 32 here, so that's 67%. That's 2/3 of my crit avoidance just on the base items. That makes that a lot easier. Another great item to have if you can get it, you'll almost certainly have to gamble this, is Orion's Eye. So this is the only unique I have in the build, but it fully converts void damage to fire and then gives you 100% increased fire protection. That's the primary things it is doing. The less damage over time taken base is also really, really good. The drop rate for this in the world is incredibly low, and it's about 1% from the gambler. So if you want this, you definitely have to target farm it. If you manage to get that, then you've gotten your void taken care of completely, but your poison and necrotic is still an issue, and it's really hard to get that in the passive skill tree. Fortunately, the Sentinel now has a couple of affixes, particularly suffixes, for conversion of poison and necrotic to physical. I have some of these in my crafting. I haven't put them on my gear yet because I'm trying to get enough. They're very hard to get. See, I have poison damage taken as physical. I have 1. And then I think necrotic I have like 5. They're really, really, real low drops. You have 4. I've gotten very lucky on my solo standard build that I've made for the tournament last weekend, and I got quite a few of these. I don't know why, because they're just not dropping at all in just my standard build. But yeah, if you can get these and you can put them on, you can get about 80% or so conversion to physical, and physical is going to be your highest. Your armor is just going to be a really high in comparison to those. Then you don't have to worry much about them at all. So that's something you definitely want to get if you can. Just be aware it's really hard to get these. Other than that, if you manage to get those, then LE prots and armor become your primary as far as protections go. If you don't, poison and necrotic are at least as important. It's harder to get poison and necrotic from any other source but gear, so you might even want to prioritize that. So again, this really depends on if you've got those conversions. Poison necrotic, not so important. If you don't have those conversions, they're very important. So that will change your priority from either LE prots and armor, or more of a balance with maybe a little bit more towards poison necrotic. And finally, health regen is good in this build because the way that Sigils of Hope works, it increases your health regen per sigil, and then you can just build off of that with health regen. So if you have some extra space and you don't have anywhere for any prots or whatnot, or if your gear just rolls on it, that's a nice thing to have as well. As far as offense, not much changes. Same as the starter build, except you add in crit chance and crit multi. Try to get quite a bit of crit chance going. Get some crit multi. You're going to crit a lot. You're going to attack a lot. And that will increase your damage pretty substantially. All right, the last thing we got to cover is idols, and these are also pretty easy. So you're going to want at least 2 well-rolled smite idols. So I've got an 8% and a 10%. That's really good if you can get that. If you don't have that many, you might want to consider doing 3 or 4 smite idols. And you can do that anyway, but I have decided to go with 2 well-rolled ones because they proc quite a bit with that. And then increasing my fire damage is the next thing I wanted. And also as a little bonus, if we can increase the damage of smite, that's also good. Those are really the 3 things you're going to be looking for on your idols. Make sure you get at least 2 of the smite idols, and then you can switch to fire and smite if you wish to, or you can roll 4 smite idols. Either way will work perfectly well. The final thing we'll cover is the rotation. And we'll start from left to right on my own hotbar, starting with Ring of Shields, which is truly a set it and forget it. Put it on auto cast and don't worry about it. If you don't know how to auto cast, I have a guide for auto casting on my channel. Go check that out. It's like 5 minutes long, really easy to figure out. The second thing is Sigils of Hope. This is, for most people, the most annoying thing of the build. We have tried to make it as unannoying as possible, but you're still going to have to deal with it. You need to keep up, I believe it's 4 sigils at all times, and you will auto proc a lot of sigils, especially in large packs, but you still need to make sure that you have 4, and if they start to drop, you're going to have to apply them again. Pretty easy to do, but having to watch the numbers not particularly fun. It's just something we got to do right now while Sigils works the way it does. Next up is Holy Aura. You're going to get the passive buff at all times. If you feel like you need a little bit extra power, attack speed, whatever it might be, say you're fighting a boss or a large pack, just hit Holy Aura and get more of the buffs. Smite is going to be auto-procced almost all of the time for you. The only time you will need to cast Smite is if you're running low on mana. If you're running Orion's Eye in your gear, that'll almost never happen. If you're not, it might happen a bit more. What you do is you get to the point where you're low mana, you press Smite until you got enough mana. Easy. And the final thing, of course, is Shield Throw, which is your main damaging ability. So you will use it to do really all of your damage. The only other time that you might want to cast it is it does have haste on use, so it's not even on hit. So when you're running around monoliths and you have large open spaces, throwing it every 2 seconds will actually make you go faster. So that's it. Simple rotation. Deal with sigils. I know it sucks, but it's worth it. And you will clear things very quickly, and you will go very high in the monolith because this is quite tanky, and as long as you're not sitting there face tanking with it, which you shouldn't be because it's ranged, it'll go very well for you. Alright, that'll do it for this build guide. As you've heard from countless other YouTubers, like and subscribe is good for us, so if you wouldn't mind, I would really appreciate it. But also, I am a little unusual as my main gig is actually Twitch streaming, and so if you'd like to come hang out, check out builds I'm working on, throw in your ideas, ask questions about the game, whatever you'd like to talk about, feel free to join. I stream about 5 days a week on average and 4 to 6 hours a day, so I'm on quite a bit. Also, I have a Discord where you can feel free to join us, ask questions there too, just hang out with the community. Would love to have you. All right, that's it for me. Enjoy your time in LE, and I'll see you again real soon with some more farming builds.